G'day everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. We're back again for power rankings on the channel in 2023. Did this last year, of course, and I did it after every month, but this year I'm going to be doing them after every 5 rounds, just so we do space out the content, especially at the start of the year. It takes around 5 or 6 weeks for the ladder to properly crystallize and we get enough of a sample size with each team's playing. Now, I do want to go over how power rankings work because there still is a large percentage of people who don't really grasp enough of an understanding of how they do work. Basically, power rankings is ranking AFL teams best to worst, 18th being the worst, all the way up to first being the best, but you add in the variables such as the quality of the team they are, their preseason expectations, the quality of their list and where they should be, the opponents they've played, their upcoming fixture, basing it off, of course, on the actual ladder. All that has to be taken into account and we are given the power ranking. So that is how I'm going to be doing it today. So a good example, let's say there was a team that finished last year. If they started the season 4-0, you wouldn't necessarily put them at the top of the power rankings. You'd probably put them around mid-table because they are a team with bottom 4 expectations, and pretty much vice versa. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a better understanding. If you're going to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. That'll be much appreciated. And let's get into the power rankings. Rightio, so we will kick it off with the worst team in the competition, in my opinion, at the moment, and in 18th I do have Hawthorn. Now, I do have to say that this season so far has been very competitive. I think it has been quite close. You can make a bit of an argument for like West Coast and North and Giants, etc., but for me, the Hawks, of the huge losses they have had, makes me put them last. A big loss against the Dons and the Swans, and you look a bit of a 50-50 win against North Melbourne, which they did play great in, and then a thumping by the Cats, and then a close loss against another probably bottom 4 side of GWS. Does result in me putting them in last. One of the youngest teams in the competition, of course. They were expected to be a bottom team this year and probably the biggest favourite to take home the wooden spoon. There's a little bit of positivity in them, of course. I think their young midfield has been quite brave. They have been playing some patches of good football. Cam McKenzie and Warple, Josh Ward and John Newcomb in there as well. They have been playing some decent quarters here or there, but then, you know, for example, in the third term, they've just fallen apart. I think last week their scores conceded was about 100 or nearly 200 points, and they've only scored about 2 goals in the first, I think, 4 rounds of the season. So that's their weakness, just playing good footy for 4 quarters, which is obviously expected. They are a very young team. They're going to be one of the bottom teams this year, and for me, they are last. In 17th place now, I've gone for the West Coast Eagles. Probably a very close second last compared to Hawthorn. I've given them the one up though, just because they've had a little bit more better performances throughout games. Close loss to North Melbourne, and then they beat Giants at their home deck. An understandable loss against the Dockers, and expected big losses against the Demons and the Cats. Sort of deja vu from last year, really. They're now starting to really pile up the injuries, especially with a few of their veteran players. Especially the last few weeks, the Eagles are really struggling to contain a few opponents, now starting to concede heavy amounts of scores. But if you do compare the Eagles from last year, I think they have improved quite a little bit. Oscar Allen, for example, in their front half is looking like the projected star key forward he should be. He's starting to really pile on the goals now. And for multiple quarters and surges throughout games, they seem to build some good football. I mean, they won their second half against the Cats in the end in last week's game. So yeah, you can see a little bit of improvement on their list and the side, but it's still going to be a very long year for them. The big losses are expected, still a pretty young team and are in a rebuilding phase. So I do have the Eagles at 17th. In 16th place now, I do have North Melbourne. Now, one of the teams from last year that have really shown improvement. Their first 2 wins were crackers, the 5-point win over the West Coast Eagles and that famous win in the West against the Dockers. You can start to see now it is going to be a long year for them. They've had the past 3 weeks some pretty decent quarters where they've managed to get things working in the midfield and really hit the scoreboard through Nick Larkey and Zurhaar and Paul Curtis as well. But it is expected, being one of the bottom teams, they will have a bit of struggling performances, go through a few quarters of bad football, and we saw that against the Blues where they just conceded way too many goals at once, and especially against the Lions with a huge 75-point loss. They definitely are heading in the right direction. They've had some nice moments so far this year, but it is expected they're going to be playing some bad football whilst trying to roll the dice and try new things and probably be more aggressive, which they have truly been with their ball movement, so they are in 16th for me. In 15th place now, I've gone with the GWS Giants. Obviously going to be probably one of the projected bottom 4 teams in 2023. Compared to the teams below them though, they probably do have a bit of the better list and sort of higher expectations to really push into maybe a bit of a smoky finals chance, but we're just not really seeing it so far. They've had some close, really solid wins over the Crows. That was probably one of their best ones of recent memory. And of course, the very close one over the Hawks. But then you just look at the losses they've had. You know, a few gallant ones, obviously, against the Blues. They got pretty close, and honestly, they could have won that game. But on the flip side, it's going to take a while for them to probably build the chemistry and the system under Adam Kingsley. I think their ball skills, especially coming from their defensive half, has been quite dismal. They've had a lot of turnovers, and down forward have been pretty inconsistent to put on heavy amounts of scoring. So I don't think they are in a disaster situation. Some expected losses, really. They've played decent, they've played poor, bit of both, really. 15th for me. In 14th place now, I've gone for the Gold Coast Suns, one of the more disappointing teams so far in 2023, a team that is having finals football as their expectations. The pre-season, they said to the media they are ready. I remember seeing articles of them partaking in very grueling pre-season sessions, so it seemed like mentally and physically they were ready to take that next step. Apart from their fantastic win over the Cats, I just don't know if they have the skills to really push up into the finals territory where they want to be at. They are ranked one of the lowest teams in turnovers and disposal efficiency. This is where it really does hurt them. They have shown the effort really in multiple games, but the problem has just been with their foot skills and inability to really get enough scoring on. I think their forward half as well has been really inconsistent. You know, Ben King sometimes hasn't looked up to it. Chol's been dropped, but then they are one of the best clearance teams in the competition. So there's a bit of negatives, a little bit of positives, but all in all, it has been a bit of a poor start to them for 2023 so far. So I've got them in 14th. I think it is a deserved spot, but they should be playing better football with their expectations. In 13th place now, I've gone with the Fremantle Dockers. They certainly should not be in this position starting off their 2023 campaign. Winning a final last year, almost making the top 4, and they simply now look like a clear-cut bottom 6 side to start off 2023. Some poor losses in there, really. Their main struggle, which I've always said on the channel, is their inability to score and put on enough points, and their efficiency in their forward half. They've been dismal going inside 50. Their method has been very boring and bland, but we have seen a little bit of glimpses. Their win, of course, over the Dockers. J.M. and 𝐼𝐶 Schultz putting on some shows, and of course their win over the Eagles. But then you look at the losses against the Crows. Pretty poor. Losing against North Melbourne is almost inexcusable, especially at Optus, and a pretty substandard loss against the Saints, only scoring 52 points. They've got some tough teams in the next few weeks. The Doggies, the Lions away, the Swans away, and the Cats. So we don't know where they'll be. Most likely, if they continue to show how they are playing, they could seriously be sitting in the bottom 6 in 5 or 6 weeks' time. So yeah, it's been a disappointing start to their season. I've got them at 13th. In 12th place, I've gone for the Western Bulldogs, a team, again, similar to Fremantle, that should be pushing and playing finals football in 2023. But I don't know, it's just been a very inconsistent campaign from them so far. I think their last few weeks have been quite decent, but their first 2 games were shockers. Losing to the Demons by 50 points and losing big, again, another 51-point loss against the Saints. The past 3 weeks, though, they've managed to pick it up quite a bit. Their clearance work is starting to get back to their best. Bontempelli and Liberatore in English are in some really good form. They've been a little bit bottled with their ball transition, and especially in their defensive half. I think Bruce and Liam Jones have had some underrated starts to their seasons so far. Yeah, they've just been very inconsistent. That's always been their problem. And is the problem the coach with Luke Beveridge? They've had a few times where maybe Bontempelli and McRae have been thrown forward where they should be more in the midfield. That's probably been another reason to their subpar start in 2023. So yeah, I do have the Bulldogs at 12th. In 11th place now, I've gone with the Richmond Tigers, slightly above the Bulldogs because I felt like they've played a little bit better in terms of losses and percentage wise. It's been a hard one to grasp on the Tigers. They do have expectations to make finals, but if you really look closely on how they have been playing, they have just not been playing their brand really that well at all. They are one of the lowest ranked teams in scores off turnovers. Last year they were ranked top, first place in that. That's where they usually play well. Their efficiency in their forward half has been quite dismal as well. I think ranked bottom 4 in multiple areas such as scoring shots per inside 50 and goals per inside 50. That's where they really need to dominate. They're a team that relies on the scoring of turnovers and keeping in their front half and repeated entries, but they've just been very ineffective in that area. Hence the losses they have had. A huge loss to the Swans, a close one where they really could have won in the end against the Bulldogs. They just got smacked in those clearances. And on top of that as well, I think their ball skills and disposal efficiency has been quite poor too. So I still do have belief in the Tigers. If they can start to pick up a bit of momentum and be a lot more efficient, they can start to really chalk up those wins. But for now, they've been quite disappointing. I have them in 11th. In 10th place now, and I've put in the Port Adelaide Football Club. Again, another one of these teams that have just been up and down a bit. It's hard to get a grasp on Port Adelaide, but with their last 2 wins, very close wins, huge win over the Swans, and a really good fourth term against the Bulldogs. They're sort of heading on the right direction now. They are sitting now 3-2. They're one of the few teams in the competition that is going to take quite a while for them to really see where they are at. They've had some really good performances, blended in with some absolutely shocking performances away, of course, against the Pies at the G, and their poor fourth term against Adelaide. They've had patches where their defence has been very leaky. They have Burn Jones and Tom Jonas play some poor football as of late, but then you've got 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼, who's suddenly now turned into an All-Australian defender again. Their upside is definitely their list, and if they can get the ball rolling, they are a very good clearance and contested side. We did see that against the Bulldogs, who are quite heavy in that department too. So yeah, it's weird, Port Adelaide. They've been very good with a few patches, but they have been terrible. But as of late, they are now starting to pick it up a little bit, but I think they do meet in the middle at 10th. Moving on to 9th place now, and I do have the Geelong Cats now. If you look at their performances from this year, they probably are a bottom 6 sort of quality looking team, but just because of their expectations, they were last year's premiers, they still have a quite of a quality list with some fantastic plays. They do sit around mid-table. The first 3 games were probably quite complacent, and I just felt they were very unaccountable, and they were poor in the midfield, and they just looked like they weren't hungry enough to get those wins. But we can now start to see, are they purring again with their last 2 wins? But granted, they were against the Hawks and the Eagles. From these power rankings, they're 2 worst teams in the competition, but you could see with their method they are now starting to pick it up a little bit more. Dangerfield's starting to regain his form, the heavy scoring in their forward half, and of course Jeremy Cameron, he's been sensational all year long. It is now expected of them to take that next step and start to chalk those wins again and start to get the ball rolling. It's a huge game against the Sydney Swans this week. This could be sort of their make or break of, are they back in top 4 contention, or are they going to have a bit of a poor year? But yeah, sort of made in the middle again. They do have high expectations. They haven't beaten the greatest opponents. They've played poor. For me, that results in me putting the Cats at 9th. In 8th place now, and I do have the Essendon Football Club. Now, don't get me wrong, from what they have versed in front of them so far, they've had a brilliant start to the season. 4-1, just knocking off the premier favourites of the Melbourne Demons. They are pretty much almost flying at the moment, but just mixed in with the expectations of where they should be at. Their expected bottom 4 team of last year, the list they do have, I don't have them all the way up in 4th or 3rd. You still got to remember that they are a team with low expectations. The list doesn't really match up to the top 5 or 6 teams in the competition at the moment. And even Brad Scott, the coach, has said to the press and internally in the club, they are keeping the lid on and having low expectations. They're taking it 1 week at a time and trying to execute their brand and their system. And Brad Scott has said himself that they still do have a long way to go from where they do want to be at. So with that all explained, we'll still actually talk about how good they have been, because we are starting to see now a bit more of a better effort. I think they've been a lot better defensively from last year. They have been a lot more accountable and a lot more tougher at it, sort of adopting that Brad Scott system. The pressure has definitely improved, especially off the turnover. I think a lot of their players have really sacrificed themselves and left their man to go and hunt for the football, and they have been a great side at ground level too. That was pretty much them in a nutshell in their win over the Melbourne Demons. So they are really heading in the right direction. Their next few weeks are very tough though. They've got the Pies and the Cats, then Port Adelaide and Brisbane away, and Richmond too. So these are going to be some tough weeks. Maybe they pick up 2, or who knows? I could be totally wrong, but just with all the things I've explained, I have Essendon at 8th. Moving on to 7th now, and I do have the Carlton Football Club. Probably a team in the first few weeks we definitely have in the top 4, but gee, that huge loss and honestly dismal performance against the Crows makes us reassess a little bit of where the Blues are truly at. Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay has pretty much just been there. They're their main recipe into scoring points so far this year. They've been very good and working well with each other. Harry Mackay working hard up the ground. Charlie Curnow top 5 in the Coleman medal so far. So even though they have picked up the results, they are sitting quite comfortably on the ladder in 4th place. You just think of, have they done it flawlessly or convincingly enough? They only have 96.3%, and a lot of their method into winning the games wasn't the most convincing sort of results. The win against the Giants could have gone either way. North Melbourne really pushed them up to halftime in their big win in the end. They have got the job done, but maybe in the long run, are they going to be good enough? Because I just think with a few of their method, the very vanilla ball movement, boring, bland, long balls down to 𝐬𝐿𝐴 where the Crows simply went to homework. They defended that superbly. Those are just the concerns I do have with the Blues, but you still have them probably as a finals quality team so far this year, and I've got them at 7th. In 6th place now, I do have the Adelaide Crows. They have had a really good start to the season so far in 2023. The first 2 losses, look, they were disappointing, but I don't think they were awful performances. Their defense, I think so far in general this year, has been mediocre. It's been okay, but just their offense and their attack has been brilliant. They're ranked first in the competition in scoring shots per inside 50. Just their inside 50 use has been very unpredictable and has been superb. They have multiple focal points of attack down there. 𝗏𝐿𝐴, Taylor Walker, 𝐼𝐴 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐴 Rankine, averaging I think over 95 points a game, which does translate into finals football because they also are a high pressure team. They're good in the contest. They do have all the blueprints really to be a true finals contender in 2023. They're not a highly anticipated and expected team to make finals. There are going to be flaws in them. Their team isn't the most sexiest on paper, but gee, what they have done so far with their players, Rankine and Dawson, Josh 𝗏𝐿𝐴 and 𝗏𝐿𝐴, they have had brilliant starts to their season so far, and I think their role players have been playing some good football too. And also the Darren Burgess effect, as I like to say, I think he's played an integral part in their start to the season so far. So they've been awesome, really. 3-2, they're bossing it, I think. Compared to their expectations, I have them at 6th. In 5th place now, I do have the Sydney Swans owning a 3-2 record where both their losses, look, could have been. I think both of them genuinely could have been wins. They've just lacked the inability to really execute in a few of those performances. Whilst on the flip side, we have been able to really see what they were really good at last year. Their high pressure, their high scoring, their clean skills across all facets of the ground. We've seen plenty of that so far in 2023. If you look at the quality of opposition they have beaten, I mean, the Suns and the Hawks, probably one of the lowest ranked teams, but getting a huge win over the Tigers really does probably push them up in the power rankings a little bit. They have shown a little bit again of surges where they just give up a bunch of goals in minutes, and their contested game has been a little bit on and off, but I still do think they are heading in somewhat the right direction. They've had some good wins, sitting at a healthy record of 3-2. They do have some big games though, given their hard draw this year. The Cats away, the Pies away within the next month, so it is going to be a big test for them, but I think so far they have been good enough, given their expectations and the quality on their lists. So I have the Swans sitting at 5th. Moving on to the top 4 now, and in 4th place, I've gone with St Kilda. Now, maybe you could put the Saints a little bit higher, but for me, where they are sitting, they're sitting top of this table still, even though they did lose against the Pies. They have got to be in the top 4 for me, and I do have them at 4th. Starting off the year 4-0 in some really good displays. I know people, and I still say, they haven't really beaten the top 3 or top 4 sort of teams in the competition. Only beaten the Suns, Bulldogs, the Dockers, and of course the Bombers. But if you just look at their method and how they are playing, they are now defensively structured, a very good team. They have a lot more accountability. Their ball movement has been bold. Their role players have been playing some fantastic football. Mason Wood all of a sudden looks like an all-Australian midfielder or wingman. Maybe we're starting to see some genuine A-graders with the likes of 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐴 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐴 and 𝐬𝐿𝐴 and 𝗏𝐿𝐴, etc. The well-structured defence being led by, of course, 𝐬𝐿𝐴, who's honestly probably been the best defender in the AFL so far this year. Only really time will tell, though, of how long they are able to really keep up their brand and execute, etc. But so far, they've had a really good start to the year. 4-1, I have the Saints at 4th. In 3rd place now, I do have the Brisbane Lions. Now, you could ask a few questions. Would you really have Brisbane at 3rd with a few of the losses they have had? A big loss away against Port Adelaide and, a pretty dismal performance, only scoring 53 points against the Bulldogs away. I do understand that, but then you look at the wins they've had. Really good oppositions they have played. They did beat the Demons at home and the Pies, and of course an expected but huge 152 points they scored in that game against the Kangaroos. Given their expectations and the list, and probably they should be a top 4 team this year, they've beaten some good quality opponents. The past few weeks now, they're really starting to get things rolling with their forward half use, and they are known as a high scoring team as well. I do have them in the top 4. I think 3rd place is a fair spot for them. Off the ball, they can be a little bit better defensively, though I don't think they have been perfect. But let's be honest, there has been not really any perfect team so far. It's hard to really separate and compare other teams, but just because their expectations are high, I think they should be a top 4 team. They're in some good form now. They're starting to get rolling with, high scoring and especially their ball use in the forward half. For me, I do have the Lions sitting in 3rd. In 2nd place now, it is hard to separate these 2 top teams. I do have in second the Melbourne Demons. Again, very hard to separate, but I do have the Pies in first, just because they do have a better win-loss record than them. But in terms of the Demons, a pretty good, solid start to the year. Again, no team's going to be flawless, no team's going to be perfect. I thought it was a disappointing performance against the Dons. I know 𝐓𝐴 was out, which really did hurt their game, especially the defensive structure. But those are the sort of losses where it wasn't really necessarily your method or your skill level that caused you to have that loss. It was probably a bit more of the effort or maybe complacency, which does happen to every team in the competition in the end. I think in general, given their list and expectations, they've played some really good football. I mean, their big win, 134 points against a hard to score against side of the Swans. High scoring wins, of course, against the Bulldogs and the Eagles. They'll certainly be up there in 2023, and yeah, the Demons should be definitely up there this year. I've got them in second. And in first place, and the best team in the competition, I think, so far is the Magpies. I say that sort of unconvincingly. I think their first 3 weeks, certainly they were one of the best teams or the best team in the competition. But yeah, after the 5 weeks, I think they still are. Their method and just how they do play is a flag-winning sort of side. They play energetic, they play fast. Their handball chains is very good, and just the synergy of the group is at a very high level as well. But with the games they have played so far, I mean, they were flawless against Port Adelaide and the Cats. Defensively, were pretty sound against the Tigers and kept a high-informed St Kilda side at bay. So 4-1 they've started the season so far, and for me, they are the best team in the competition so far this year. So everyone, there are my power rankings after the first 5 rounds of the 2023 AFL season. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you wanted to enjoy today's video. Feel free to comment down below your sort of power rankings if you agree or disagree. These are always a big heavy debate, so I'd love to hear your people's opinions. Once again everyone, thank you very much for tuning in, and until next time, I will talk to you later. See you later, fellas.